this episode of Troublemakers Smoke Signals, we would like to discuss what recently happened at Colombia University. It's not the first time that student protesters and pro-Palestinian protesters and their comrades are being attacked by the university and also by the police. And this is, of course, not the only university where this is happening. The struggle for the liberation of Palestine has been active on many fronts across university campuses around the world. But I just wanted to talk about something that is really standing out for me in the whole kind of media framing following the repression against protesters in one of the libraries at Columbia University. There's this sort of like blaming of the protesters as disrupting an academic environment, disrupting people's ability to study in a quiet library, etc. And I'd like to just kind of challenge this, because the assumption behind these accusations is that learning happens sort of in personal isolation and solitude. Of course, it can happen there, but an academic environment is not one where action is divorced from reflection. And I think this is something that Western pedagogies have been really bad at. There are other pedagogies that suggest that to actually learn something, you have to do it. You have to. There's an action that needs to be taken, and I think if we're not learning that there's apartheid and a genocide happening in the world, and we're not learning about how our institutions that we're members of, that we pay money to for tuition, for example, are implicated in this atrocity of our times, then what are we really learning? And then the other question is about how are we learning it? Is it an exam that I must study for, which of course I could go under any tree, to any dorm room, to any cafe, to any public or private space to study. It's not a must for me to be in a library where there's a lot of noise, if indeed that's the most urgent thing that I must be doing right now, is to quietly study. But are we suggesting that less learning happens when there's dissent? I think the opposite is true. The more we have dissent around things that are worthy of dissent, the more opportunity we have actually to learn and to process the world around us, to consider our engagement with that world. So to me, these kind of like accusations by students and by certain university personalities, etc., that this was disruptive to an exam period, it reminded me of some years back when there were mass protests in Kampala City, how the Museveni dictatorship would say, this is disruptive to business. We're not able to exchange goods while there are protesters in town. Traffic cannot flow, And of course, behind that is a thirst for the tax revenue collection. If people are not coming to the city center to engage in trade, then there's less tax revenues collected on that day. So obviously, there's like a sort of vested interest by the kleptocratic state to make sure that the revenue flows are really heavy. But there's this way of sort of demonizing and othering protesters. I remember a dear family member of mine, like, walking through their living room, and they were watching Fox News, and the talking head on Fox News was explaining how they were celebrating how a security guard body slammed a campus protester. And I remember watching my relatives to see if they would flinch or even blink at that, and they didn't. The level at which we've normalized brutality against people that inconvenience us in minor ways, because Whenever there's a protest, you wait a few minutes. You go the next block over. Like, if you really want nothing to do with that, worst case scenario is that you take a walk 2 blocks and you get to your destination through another route, or you wait a few minutes, God forbid. So let's really interrogate, what is public space meant to do in our societies? Aren't universities supposed to be in the commons? Aren't we all supposed to have access to them? Are these not places where we engage in dissent and conflict and dialogue through our actions, through our words, through whatever, pathos we may adopt in order to articulate our positions and to challenge things about the world that we live in? Free Palestine, liberate Palestine. We support the comrades that are fighting for the liberation of Palestine. That's the most important thing here. But also this represents a particular, crises of our time where we're talking about the public space for all of our struggles. We can't just allow people to other us or demonize us just because we have something to do or something to say within a public space. That's completely unacceptable in the 21st century.
Hi! We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers Podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast for all the latest updates, behind-the-scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.